So, tonight I'm going to work through. Here we have. One of the great things, I finally just bit the bullet and I renamed all of the images in the Tellurion series. So instead of my convoluted 3 images per page naming system, where it would be like 001, 01, 00102, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Now it's just out of 3 numbers. So it's just from 1 to, at this point, up to 130.
Okay.
So hopefully this will be a little bit more streamlined. Um,
Oh,
yes.
so I noticed like in the last stream there was one picture called like Romance Ruins.
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay. Wait, so that isn't and that's okay. Wait, so that isn't the naming scheme in effect.
No. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know how to. I don't have full editing software, so that was just some shorthand. Um,
Okay.
but looking at this, so I've got. Excuse my coughing there. So thumbnail. I'm just going to go through this process. Ooh, 4 updates available. Thank you. No,
Oh,
thank you.
right. So you've just made it like just a flat number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so this one is image 128.
Mhm.
So, thumbnail, took it up to sketch with this sketch just to keep the elements all in order. I just added some really basic color just to get the idea in place.
Oh, that's
And
a cool perspective.
so, yeah, this has been one I've been wanting to try out for a while. I've had this image in my head, and so it felt good to kind of take a swing at it. And so, just to jump, basically because I don't have it separated into my progress layers this time, this is the image as it stands now. And this will be the one that's going up probably tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So we've got some figures and some imagery and some circles. And that's that. Thank you, everybody in the chat. So we've taken that up to color. It's got the line work and the colors and all of that fun stuff. I can flip off just to show, flip the color grading on and off. Just to this one was there's a big wrestling match at the color layer to kind of get it working. So I have both the overlaid lighting scenario here and then the color grading pass to get it kind of feeling like the right mood that I was going for. Took quite a bit
Right.
to wrestle that one. But
So what's the difference between the grading layer and like the full color? Is it like is it just local color?
yeah, the without it, this would just basically be the color that is then affected by whatever the light temperature or whatever the lighting pass that I put on it was. So
Right.
this would be effectively just the natural light that existed there.
Mhm.
And then, so this would be, yeah, this is basically all of the shadows and the lights. And then the kind of atmosphere and kind of hazy lighting.
Mhm.
And then in this grading pass, let me see, I have a color adjustment, some value adjustment on the outskirts a bit to vignette it a little bit, and then a slight kick in saturation. And so
Okay.
all of that works together to give me this.
Yeah.
So that one, I will just tuck that one away. Although actually one thing I just to say too, for anyone interested, I got it. It was actually originally this, but there was just this extra element that after I was able to stew on it for overnight. Nicky Orfino, hey, how's it going? Welcome. So I just was able to add this extra element on top in brass, just because it was needed a little bit more. So that's that one. Next up, actually, I'm going to spend just a little bit of time in the color grading and lighting stage because I'm just kind of doing the finishing touches to the next shot. And so the next one here is, so this is my modified thumbnail. With this one I had a slightly more elaborate thumbnail, and then there was an expression that I wanted to spend some extra time on. Thank you, Nikki Orfine. I'm just going to say Nick. I hope that's all right. Yeah, so Tema squared that face. Yeah, so I had worked out, I wanted this specific expression, so I had sketched it out and then just slapped it on there, and so that kind of acted as my base. How much time goes into creating each of these pages? I'd say I'm still thinking it's probably about 6 to 8 hours in total. So we've got the underlayer, and then here you'll see my slightly more elaborate SketchUp model in the background, and the sketch, this is my, again, the pencil layer. So spent some time with this one and got that. Let's see what's underneath here. Took it to this. I'll just zoom out a little bit so it actually gets out of the way of the layers in the window here. But there were a few more things that I wanted to do to it. So I am going to noodle away at this. Anyone who is hanging out in the chat, you are welcome to jump into the Discord. There's the link. So feel free to hop on in. And if it's a little easier to answer questions if you have them by audio than to be constantly reading. So feel free to jump in. And yeah, I'll just close that. I'll just start working. Remembered this time to take. I've been kind of screenshotting or like doing a flattened layer and kind of saving that as my reference point for where I started. So I have this as a separate layer. It helps every time I go back. Sewing Discord and chat, eh? Exactly. How many hundreds of thousands of times has that joke been made now? So I've got my grading layer. Same thing. This one's a little bit more subtle, but it still is doing similar work. And then some of the bounce lights. There were a couple things that I wanted to mess with. I wasn't totally satisfied with some of these little highlights. Just thinking I would try it a different way. So yes, please, anyone who's tuning in, feel free to ask any questions or yeah, throw it out there.
Yeah, I guess that's my cue. So what? Oh, whoops. What was it? So when you were designing for Mass Effect, when you were, I'm guessing that you didn't like it was kind of like, had you done any sci-fi work up to that point, or was it like an abrupt like transition?
I had done I guess never really professionally by any stretch, but it was definitely something that I enjoyed messing with on occasion.
Mm. Did you do anything to prepare for it? Like look at what's already out there?
Oh yeah,
or, like, study?
absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I mean, one of the big things that I did, honestly, for Mass Effect was I watched a lot of my old favorites. So and like watched them through, and then went through again, taking notes and sketching while I watched. So some of the major ones would have been like Blade Runner, or the original Star Trek movie.
Right. Okay. Cool.
A lot of the things that I mean, it's obvious at this point. A lot of the things that Sid Mead was instrumental in designing for, those were a huge inspiration. because I've described it. A lot of the team has described it this way before. It was very much a love letter of a project. Um,
Yeah.
very much like this is the stuff that we all loved. So it was a way of trying to yeah. I think love letter's a good way of putting it. Cold Burger Art is rating with a party of 35. Holy cow! Thank you very much, Cold Burger Art. That's kind of amazing. Holy wow! Thanks for jumping in, Hoser, Stealth Monkey, Cold Burger Art, Nabulum. You are already here, but yes, that's good. That's awesome. Well, thanks for doing that. I'm still learning what all of this actually means, but it's awesome to have you.
So, one thing that I have a lot of trouble with any projects that I start is follow through. I guess after working on it for a while, it just gets to the point where I get more and more burnt out on it.
Yeah.
So what do you do to keep yourself invested in a project, especially one like this that's been going on for months?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not sure if I would be even the one to answer that, just because I guess I have actually been doing it now for a while, so that works. But it's and part of the reason why I think my gut reaction is that maybe I'm not the right one to answer that is that historically, I mean, even part of the way that I work is built a little bit on impatience. Like I want the image to be done so I can move on to the next thing. And it's just like, okay, do you get it? Do you get what I'm trying to say here? Okay, we're done. Let's move on. But I think partly having a plan helps. Like I think having an objective, knowing, even if it's like one of the things that I've been advocating for and I've been trying to do myself is writing down your intentions before you put pencil to paper. So it's like, this is the image that I want to make, or this is the story I want to try to tell. And then it's a little easier for you to measure whether you're at the finish line or not, or getting close to the finish line, or if you're like halfway.
Right.
And then it's also a good way of telling when you can either when it's time to stop, because I think two things that can get you are you just keep noodling and noodling forever, and trying to find the image and not sure what you're going to say, and it's just drawing for the sake of drawing, which I mean there's a time and place for that for sure, but but if you're trying to come up with the image, write down what you're trying to say, steer everything towards saying it, and it should be easier to kind of keep track of, and so you're not getting kind of lost in it.
So that's probably your process for when you sit down to like start the next page, right? But I guess how much of the story did you have outlined or plotted out before you even started the first page? Did you have the whole thing already visualized to some extent?
Not well, I had the whole thing outlined, just because I wouldn't ever be comfortable just starting without knowing what the end was, because I just knew that like I was gonna start off making, like, with a visual story like this. Every decision you make is visual in some way. Right. Everything you're trying to say is visual, and so I knew I wanted to have context for everything and meaning for everything. Like I didn't want any decisions to just be arbitrary, and so in order to do that, you have to know kind of where is this headed, where is this going, and so it was all outlined still very broadly, but at least outlined. And then that means that now when I'm trying to make decisions or like adding a new character or trying to put something in, I know where it's going to fit. I know why it's going in, and so having that context makes things, it's a lot faster to design when you know what the context is that you're working towards. And so I'm not getting tripped up on like this. It's actually almost unnerving, because like I'm how quickly character design actually happens while doing this. For example, I mean, at work right now, I'm actually in the midst of character design, and that is it's a fun process, but it is a long and involved and very, I won't say like there is just so many people involved in it that nothing comes quickly, and there's a lot of deliberating and trying stuff out and seeing if it works and making
Sure,
adjustments.
because you're trying to create something unique, right? You're trying to create something that people haven't necessarily seen before, and it's going to be memorable in the long run.
Yeah, well, and just to even more than that, because I mean that's a part of it, but even more than that is trying to design something that is true, without a lot of context. Like if you could wait until the end of a game development to design the characters, those would be the best designed characters ever. But you don't get to do that. So you know some stuff, but you don't know everything, and you don't know the full context, and you don't know what's going to change. So it's every time you do it, it's sort of your best guess. Whereas like for this, I know where it's going. I know what's going on. Jehunli88 in chat raid. Okay, we'll jump in. Awesome. You're trying your best, and it's like, all right, let's hope this works. With a story like where it's your own, I know where it's going. I know who these characters are. I know what the end game is. So I can just design stuff, and I've designed some characters in a couple minutes, and you're like, this works. This actually works, and I could twist myself around for days and weeks and months trying to rethink this, but okay, let's just do it.
That's something that I had never thought of either, is the idea that, once you see the ending, once you know the ending, it's just way easier to visualize the character, whereas when you're starting from the character design process or from the design process, you're absolutely right. It's way harder to create a character that's going to fit through the whole story or whatever you're creating.
Yeah.
I never thought of that before, but that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and that's why I'm such a big believer in like as a concept artist, if you're working in that one of the biggest roles you have, especially early on, is just you are a question asker. Like your job is just to talk to as many people as possible and to know as much as you possibly can. And like you'll never know enough. You'll never know all the information, but to get as much context as possible, just be like starving for context. Then you can be way more effective. I like that a little more. Okay. It's funny. It's so handy to be, if you can, to be able to sleep on an image and just stew on it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I'm just flipping back and forth every now and then just to check my previous pass, just seeing if I can remind myself of anything else before I move on.
Well, just the act of getting like a fresh set of eyes on it after a good night's sleep is it's hugely beneficial.
Exactly.
On the boot of that of the boy, I've noticed the reflection. Is that like is that your light and shadow, like the base values of your light and shadow?
Not exactly. They're a little fudged. They're I would say a faded version of the blue atmosphere, and then just the orange is kind of a generalized ground reflection color.
Okay.
And I'm not going for like the accurate ground color, just sort of something that I feel like
that looks right
and doesn't get too distracting. It's too bright, and it'll just start pulling attention away from the face. So let's see.
Now, has this been your most involved personal project that you've worked on?
By a country mile. It still is a little surreal, actually. When I look at how much has been done already, and just thinking about anything else I have ever attempted, hasn't even come close. I mean, I just think of like there was the ILM challenge, the Star Wars project, where it was like an entire summer of painting, for that project. And at the end of that, I was like, wow, man, that was fun. I've never actually made my own pile of stuff. Like at work, I've created mountains of material, but
Sure.
not for myself. And so that was a really really neat experience. And so now it's been a year and a few months, and I'm at this is image number 129. The fact that it's super surreal for me, in that I don't feel like slowing down. I haven't ever felt like, oh, okay, I got to do another one. It's
That's great. That's
yeah,
really reassuring to feel, I think.
it's and it's like it's such a weird feeling for me that I almost didn't even know what to do with it, dude. So I never really felt this before. Oh yeah, for anyone who's interested, here's my lighting guide. Just my setup of lines, just to roughly make sure that I knew where my shadows were gonna fall.
Is that are you using the what tool is it? It's like that tool where like you draw out a bunch of spooks from a point.
No,
The
just
polygon?
just the classic line tool, and then I just distorted it to smush one side.
Oh, okay.
Now, when you look back at like your starting panels, the first like dozen or 2 dozen panels,
Mm-hmm.
do you still feel confident about those? I know that's something that I don't mean like I don't mean to be like like I
No,
don't mean
it's
to
a
say
very
they're bad. Like they're still great, but
no,
it's
it's a
like
good question.
when you've worked on something for a really long time, at least in my experience, I will like go back because I do a lot of writing and storytelling that way. So when I
Okay.
go back to like the beginning of something that I've been working on,
Mm-hmm.
I will actually like realize that it isn't quite up to the standard that the rest of the story has been on. So I have
Sure.
to go back and like rework that, and then I'm like, well, should I go back and rework everything that I've written so far? And if there's that battle that I have with myself, I'm just wondering
Oh
if
yeah.
like you've had that, if you've had to suppress that urge to go
That
back
is
and like fix stuff.
that's a good question. I have gone back and looked at the images, and thankfully that hasn't ever overwhelmed me. Like, I haven't ever felt, oh my goodness, I got to go back and fix this up. But I have, there's a few informal rules that I've given myself for this, and one of them is that there's no going back, no inserting. That I have to like kind of burn my way through it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so, looking back, if there's something that I would have liked to have changed or something I missed, it's like, nope, it's gone. That ship has sailed. I can't.
Forward momentum.
Yeah, it's just got to keep going. And so,
That's probably a really smart way of going about it.
well, I feel too like if I didn't do that, then I would be screwed. Like I would just keep going back and adding more and injecting stuff and swapping things out. That's part of too why a little bit motivated why I'm just releasing it as I go, rather than just building it up in secret. Is
also
just
another great reason to have it fully outlined when you first start.
well, and that was it too. That was why why I didn't want to actually start on it until I really knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Where I was going to go, because I'm a big fan too of in concept art when you can just have imagery near the beginning that may not make total sense, but by the end you kind of understand why all those decisions were made.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make sure that I was at least broadly aware of all the things that I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with it.
Right.
We'll see if it actually works. I mean, there's still massive unknowns.
Percentage wise, like without giving away too much, how far do you feel you are with the story so far?
If I had to guess, optimistically, I'm a third of the way through.
Wow.
Realistically, it might be closer to a quarter.
Holy.
It depends on how it's all going to go.
Yeah.
it could go so many different ways. Like I have it, like I say, I have it outlined. I know where I'm going and what I want to do. I just recently thought of a way that I can actually collapse two major moments that I wanted to do, and not in a way that is. I don't want it to ever be in a way that's at the sacrifice of telling the story or doing it in a way that
you want to be economic with your storytelling, but you also don't want to deprive
yeah.
people of context also.
Exactly, and I think part of it is knowing. Yeah, it's because as I have time to think about it and have time to think about what it is I'm working on. I'm thinking of smarter ways to do it. You know, ways that it's like, oh, I guess I totally wasted. Like I won't say which ones, but there are frames in Tellurion as it is now that it's like, yeah, I probably didn't need to do that. I'm glad it's in, but that probably wasn't totally necessary.
Well, it's a learning process too.
And that's the thing, is that out of all of this, that's one thing that I like back in the day when I made a comic called My Hero. That was a huge learning process, and I'm so thankful for that. And so I definitely wanted this to be a repeat. And that, you know, coming back around, if that this one might lead to the next one. And to be honest, in the back of my head while I'm working on this, I'm already kind of thinking about what the story after Tellurion would be. Brent says, what would you recommend doing to improve on composition? What really got me hooked was the way you told the story in the first few panels, along with the entire world you've built. You've done a great job letting the audience piece together the lore of the world. Oh, well, thanks. I'm glad that's coming through. When it comes to composition, I've only really been learning about this stuff lately, over the last couple of years in particular, just because on Dragon Age Inquisition, the concept art team really started doing storyboards in a way that they had never done before. And we had this great, our lead animator, Paul Dutton, comes from film and worked on The Illusionist and Triplets of Belleville, and he really helped kind of coach us through the storyboarding process and all that. And he got us really hooked on looking at film language and watching a lot of documentaries and behind the scenes footage of the greats, as it were, and so we really started looking a lot at that. So I think film is a great place to start, because to me, the thing that you really learn is that everything is intentional, or at least it can be. So with good filmmakers, it's intentional, and with not so great filmmakers, it's, they just grab a camera and point. And I think the same can be true of illustration, where it's like, what do you like for when I'm doing it as an example. I'm thinking, okay, what are the elements? What's the story that I'm trying to tell? Like, what's the actual really important thing? Let's see, Ward. Oh, some people jumping in, and so I think it's okay. What are you trying to say here? Actually, let me pull one up. I'll try to see if I have the sketches for it, because there was one shot in particular that I wanted to do a top-down composition. But the more and more that I worked on it and kept drawing the thumbnail, the more I realized that just wasn't working. That wasn't what I wanted to show. Okay.
I'll also say that when I was in school for sequential art, one of the things that I realized is, like what you just said, film is so inherently tied into visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Like, if you wanted to learn anything about composition, especially like framing a shot, which is basically what a comic is, it's just a series of individual shots. You just pick up a cinematography book.
Exactly. Let me see here. Let me see if it's in my sketches. Oh, okay, I think it might be, yeah. So here with this image, what has now been renamed as 89. So the first thumbnails. So here's for the sake of talking about composition. First thumbnail. Let me see if I can. increase the contrast on this. Oh, okay. Red and blue, this is like the worst for color adjustment. Try to flatten it at all, and it just everything disappears. So first composition on this was very much looking down. So you're looking down on this figure sitting around, and hi to everyone who's jumping in. Sorry, I'll finish this thought and then say hello to everybody. So I sketched it out in more detail, figured out the poses and all of that, but wasn't happy with it. Because again, it was focused too much on. And again, sorry for those who are just joining who haven't been a part of these streams. The way I talk about this is that I will refer to things very generally, so as not to talk about content, so as not to take away from the visual stories or the visuals carrying the story. So I will just refer to things in very general terms. This composition makes the focal point the object in the center, and that wasn't at all what I wanted to focus on. So I redrew the sketch, basically lowered the camera. This is literally just a camera move, and I'll flip back and forth here to show it off. Literally just a camera move, lowering it down, changing the poses up a little bit, trying to get some more expression in there, and actually got it to the point where I was partly done the inking phase. So I had all but inked. I had inked 2 of the 3 figures. Had done the pencil sketch, had done the inks, and it still wasn't feeling right. So I went back and thumbnailed it again, and this time we could now be looking past. Here, let me draw it. Now you're still seeing this element, but you're looking past it. And your focus is now finally in the right place.
Okay, yeah.
In the place that I want.
Yeah, now it tells a completely different story.
Exactly, yeah. So if I flip back to this, it's a different mood. It's a different. There's a different idea of the relationship going on, and so it's really just saying, like with cinematography, you have the opportunity to the placement of your camera is telling this story. Like every little bit is contributing to it if you let it. And so with that said, that's how the final image turned out.
You just hear that robot's arm squeaking. It's going up and down
with sand in it.
Yeah.
So that said, I am just beginning the sketching process. So this is my thumbnail, and this is a really scruffy one. So you probably won't even really be able to tell what it is until I've elaborated on this a little bit more. So bear with me, and we should be able to get it legible pretty soon. So hey, again, thanks for everybody who just jumped in. Glad that you're all in. And just as a reminder, let me grab you in case anyone else would like to jump in. Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. I am going to be doing this like a grandpa. Let's see. Okay. There we go. There. Okay. All right. Have I still got audio coming out of Discord?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, good. So yeah, anyone who's just joining, you can jump in the Discord if you want to join in the conversation, or just do it from chat. That works too. Where did the lighting fall into mind during that transition from concept to final? Well, a lot of that too is I try to actually keep spontaneous. Sorry, I'll open that back up. I like to keep it. I have some general ideas because of the nature of what is going on in the scene. I thought that a night scene would work best. Ward Castle. Hi, Matt Rhodes. Wonder if someone erased your memory, how much time it would take you to archive professional level of drawing with the current information available. If I understand, are you wondering how long these take? But yeah, so with this scene in particular, because I wanted it to be this kind of group camp thing, setting it at night made sense. Figuring out sort of what I wanted the mood and emotion to be. This is taking forever to open, so I am going to open a small version. Bear with me here. Just going to open that up. Okay, that's faster. So it really just was a number of like a matter of figuring out kind of what are all the actual elements that I want in there, what kind of mood, what sort of feelings do I want to evoke, and then just kind of trying to pick the colors that work there. That was effectively it. There is sort of an elephant. There is an element of that I like to be surprised a bit myself. Like for this one, I knew I had this light coming in from the top, but what it was actually going to do, I didn't know. I had some general ideas on what I'd like the feeling to be on this one, so that kind of gave me a few broad ideas of where I would like to place it. To you, like if start all over from nothing. Oh, I see. Okay, like so how long would it take to go from nothing to where I'm at now? That's really hard to say, because I have been drawing my whole life and trying to learn about drawing my whole life, and working with my brother, even as kids, trying to improve our drawings and all that sort of stuff. So it's been a while, but I've known some people who start. Actually, one thing that's great is I've known a few different people who are Marines, and one of the things that they've done is after their time in the Marines, and the time comes to pick a career, pick a direction to go, and they can get their schooling done and through the Marines and all that. They've headed into the arts really intentionally. And the really awesome thing is that because they come with this like Marine discipline and focus, and like it the one thing that has been kind of amazing to see is most people, you would tell them, they say, how would I learn how to draw? And you'd say, okay, we'll do these studies and work on your figures and work on your fundamentals and do the life drawing and all that sort of stuff. And most people are like, okay, cool, and they could probably go off and do it, but you don't know. But the Marines that I've known, they come back and are like this what you mean? What's next? How, like, it's like, all right, that trench is dug. What's next? Give me another one. It's like, holy crap. And their skill levels have just been like to a really frightening level.
It is a skill that requires like just a ton of discipline
Huge.
to grow.
Yeah.
So it completely makes sense that would translate from active military service.
Yes. Well, and I there was one other thing that I've always liked, and I can't quote it directly because I can't find the video anymore. But there's an artist named Connor Williamson, and he years ago did this interview. And someone was saying, how do you become an artist? Like, what's required? What do you need? And he said, it's like, oh, you just need a special cocktail of mental illnesses. And to a point,
it's alarmingly,
it was like, I can't totally disagree with you, because it's like, you kind of, if you don't really like being around people, but you still need to connect, and you are hyper focused on stuff, but you also kind of get drawn into everything. Like, there's all these different things that if you have the right kind of blend of them, it's like really, really beneficial. But no, I think you can get that. You can get that from, yeah, just deciding. Like a lot of people, I don't think anybody gets into it by accident. Like at a certain point, you have to decide, I'm doing this, and this is going to be work, and I'm going to bust my ass to do it. Because you literally have to ignore almost everything to achieve it. Well, and that's the thing too. One of the ways that I've put it to people, and this can sound a little bit fatalistic, but I think it's kind of true, is that you have to sacrifice that thing in your life that's getting in the way. and I can't tell you what it is. This is how I always put it to people. I can't tell you what that is, but just by me saying it, you probably thought of what that is. Um, because
That's so true.
yeah, it's just one of those things where there's that thing that's eating up your drawing time, and you might need to get rid of it for a while. Because here's a story that I've told many times, but there was a teacher that I had back in junior high I had mentioned a drawing for like the 1,000th time in one of my homework assignments, and he said, it's great that you love this, but you probably want to focus on some other stuff because like a million kids want to learn how to want to draw for a living. And my thinking there was, okay, granted, a million kids want to draw for a living, but I know kids. I know other kids. I know what they're doing. I think my chances are actually pretty good. I think I could work harder at this than a million kids. Might sound a little arrogant, but like this is the thing that I love so much, and I know very few people that I know are actually working on something. And so
that was something.
Yeah, what were you gonna say?
That was something that I noticed while I was at art school, is that so many people went there, to pursue their dreams of drawing whatever. But the thing about going to an arts college is that their admission standards are like not as high as you would expect them to be.
Well, they want,
and then you have so many people who they just want the money.
Yeah,
right? They want people to go there and talk about their school, and then you have so many people who are there who have a really low threshold for their skill level and for their discipline level, and they go through the whole 4 years. They don't really pay attention during the critiques, and then they graduate and they never really grew, or they never really honed their skills. They're still drawing the same way they were drawing with their admission portfolio, and it's like you set yourself up for $200,000 worth of failure.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've said before that it regularly amazed me when I would hear people saying, "Oh man, that was such a rough project. I had no time. I have no time." Also, did you see The Bachelor last night? It's like, wait, what do you, no time? What are you talking? Like, you watched this, or like, yeah, it was, I have no time to work on this project. It's so rough. Man, that party was great. It's like, you're going to parties? What, but what about drawing? What?
Yeah, that part always frustrated me. Like, I'll admit that I was a procrastinator. I was like not a perfect student.
Oh, I wasn't either. No, I don't want to give that impression either.
But I was like able to admit, like, if a project wasn't good, if it wasn't the quality that I'm capable of, I just say like, yeah, I just chose not to, I just put it off. But then there'd be people who we had 2 weeks to draw like 4 pages of a comic, and people were like, I just didn't have any time. It's like, you had 2 weeks. It takes you 10 hours to do a page. Like, come on.
Well,
don't BS people.
Well, here's a good lesson for anyone going in, is like, if you are given 2 weeks to do a project, do 2 weeks worth of work. In that, like, not spend 2 weeks entirely working on it, but I mean, don't do 6 weeks worth of project. Because like so many times you could tell people were just killing themselves, pouring so much work into these projects, when it was like, you knew you had 3 days to do this. Why are you doing 2 weeks worth of project? Do 3 days worth of work.
Definitely do the amount of work that you have time to do, but don't try to do that same amount of work. Like, don't put off a 2-week project to the last 2 days and expect
or that,
2 weeks worth of work done.
No.
Like, just do what you can.
You're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. And also pay attention in critiques, because everyone's gonna have important things to say. You may not always agree with them, but it's just better to listen and say, yeah, cool, than to be like one of those people that is
no. See what this actually meant.
Really combative. And,
yeah.
Like, you're not impressed. Like, it doesn't matter what you intended. If it wasn't communicated visually, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's if it's not on the page, it doesn't count. Well, I'd say that critique thing, that that I think more than almost anything else. Because I say, I went to art school at ACAD, and it was a great school, and I really liked it, and it was awesome. Um, but one of the things that I would say is that on the side, I was also on the art forums posting artwork on a regular basis. So it's like you're like get the critiques in class, but also seek out a community of really passionate people who can also give you really honest feedback.
It's honestly probably even better to do that because the feedback you're going to be getting is completely unbiased. It's going to be from people you don't really know.
From people who don't have to
As
look you in
like
the eye.
Every single day, yeah, people you're not going to keep seeing. So it's plus a lot of those people you see on art forums are going to be like professionals who are currently working, who have a lot of work out already. So their feedback is almost more valuable than your peers.
Well, yeah, and it's so true. Well, and that's a case where I'm finding myself where I look around and now almost everybody that I came up with is working somewhere. So many people from the forums are like, "Oh yeah, I work at this studio now," or "I work at this studio." It's really awesome. Brent says, "Not sure how to word this, but any advice on working on a study with the intent of learning something? You can spend the time working on something, but still not learn what you intended to do." And Jumper says, "Hello, nice to finally catch one of your streams." Well, thanks for jumping in. But to answer that question, yes, I think one of the things that you can do is to learn while you're doing a study is to, at least I find this really helps, is stylize your subject matter. And do a few passes of it. So do like the study pass where you're just drawing from observation, but then try to simplify it. And because in simplifying it, then you have to really examine it on a whole other level, and you have to start making choices about what's important information to convey this subject matter and what's not. One of a great way to do this would actually also be Jake Parker's, I think it's 8-minute drawing exercise, where he sets up he has this timer on his YouTube channel where the first drawing you do of something I think is 2 minutes, and then the next round is 1 minute, then the next is 30 seconds, then the next, and it starts going down like that. And so that I find really handy. Like if you're really trying to learn something, whether it's a character design or an object, go through that process, because by the time you're doing the 5-second drawing, you're doing maybe one line. But in that process and looking at all of them, you'll realize that you've actually extracted the goo from the thing.
The essence, yeah.
Yeah. It's really neat.
One of my favorite classes at SCAD, which is where I went, was a speed drawing class where literally we would just like every single class would start off with 5 minutes of like 5-second gesture drawings.
Yeah.
And you don't get anything out of it.
Oh, no.
You don't get anything on the paper for that except the lines of action, maybe like a couple like block-ins of the anatomy. But what you're taking away from that is how to convey like form with 2 lines. Yeah. And that's like such a fantastic building block to be able to go from.
That would be huge. Yeah, I was doing figure drawing, and I was doing like these 5-minute, 10-minute, like really luxurious, take my time renderings, and I forgot to pause the video that I was watching while doing it, and suddenly started doing even just 30-second ones. And man, that was like, oh, there's no time. No. I'm not used to this.
It's definitely like a mental hurdle you have to get over. Mm-hmm. Like I think it took all of us like the first 2 or 3 classes to really like get to that mindset, or be able to just jump to that mindset right when the class started. But God, it was one of the most. And he would play like this remix of the Speed Racer theme song from the new movie.
Oh, there you go.
It was like perfect.
Oh, that's fun. That sounds like a good exercise. Wardcastle says, I have another question. What pushes your limits in terms of struggle mentally? Found that hard mental work actually makes me learn somehow, but what would be your struggle? Here is a thing that I've been trying to do. So anytime I'm drawing something, and I can tell if I'm really honest with myself that I just tried to fake it. I force myself to go do the research. So if I can tell, okay, I'm drawing this figure, but I really just sort of like tried to kind of cough my way through those hips, or I just kind of fudged the line on those shoulders. You get it, it works, but I know that I faked it. Then I know that it's time for me to go try to figure it out. And so I think that, you know, you're always gonna, there's always gonna be something. There's always gonna be something, you know, because I've gone back and studied the hips like 50 times because I keep forgetting, because that's just how that works. But every time something like that comes along, or I did this deep dive on animals a while back where I was really trying to learn animal anatomy, like being able to draw, especially wolves and horses. That's all gone now. Almost everything that I learned is gone. I mean, there's probably still some academic info back there, but if I'm gonna do that again, I'm gonna have to go start from scratch, skeleton, muscle, do multiple angles, just try to simplify, try to create my own simplification language for it, try to, you know, just go through the whole process. And Junkspur says, off topic, but I just want to say that I've been a huge fan of your work for a while. Oh, thank you. Had to do a project based on Dune, and your character designs were very inspirational. Probably the best I've ever seen. Well, thank you very much. That's really encouraging. And thanks too. Those Dune drawings are still some of my favorites. That was kind of a fun little diversion. Okay. Not sold on these figures at all, but got the idea in.
It's a start.
Yep. It's just not blank canvas. So I'm going to...
That's something I definitely need to do more of those, study, just go back and like look at anatomy again. And just like, especially, because one thing I'll do is I'll just look at like one part of the body and I won't really like then go back and see how it relates to like the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I, you know, do some more drawings, I like forget how those relationships are actually supposed to work, and things like get disproportionate, and it's like, well, I should probably go back and look at this part of the body, but it's never like the whole picture all together.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, people say it all the time. It's not like riding a bike. It goes away. But you're right too in thinking of it in context. Like it is all part of a system. And the nice thing too is the more you work on it, and the more you know it in the system, the more it kind of helps the whole.
Yeah.
It kind of stacks in a way.
Well, it's like if you look at a bad drawing of a body, like if one part of the body doesn't look right, then the whole thing doesn't look right.
Exactly. When we know them super well, you'd still recognize something. Believe me, studying biochemistry told me that it sucks, but it's reality. We are not machines. Glad you found this channel. Well, glad you joined us. When I make characters like those, do I start with a silhouette to get a definite shape? No, usually actually I start with the line of action. In this case, they were sitting. I had some general ideas, some general flow, and then I kind of build up on top of that, almost like a rig, like I'm starting from like a loose skeleton to muscles. Have I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender? No, I haven't. It's one of the best shows in terms of storytelling and character designs. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't actually watched through it. But yeah, from what I've seen, they do a great job. Ward Castle, I will look you up in ArtStation. Well, thank you. Yep, lots of stuff there. You can read the whole story that I'm working on now as it stands there if you want. Link should be in my Twitch info thing. Also, in case anyone is just jumping in the Twitch info thing, if you scroll down, I did put in a frequently asked questions thing, which it's actually been nice so far. I haven't had a lot of repeats tonight, so that's great. Bravo to the questioners so far. Unless you guys are just being super proactive and have already read the frequently asked questions. Now I'm going to just rotate this horizontally and try to do better. This is really just more a glorified thumbnail at this point. Do I use the same method for the Dune character lineup, for example? Yeah. And to Word Castle, no, I don't have a book yet. No, at some point, maybe. Um, I did definitely go through the Dune. The Dune lineup was very much a story first kind of a process. So I wanted to have. I wrote down some of the key things that I wanted to try to communicate, and then tried to think of design elements that would support those. So yeah, I was very much trying to find, just because Dune is one of those bizarre. It's such a bizarre IP in that it's so evocative yet nondescript. It's written in a very immersive and vibrant way, but he's not. But Herbert didn't get too specific on details, so it's one of those gems that are very open to interpretation, which means that so many artists have done so many takes on them. So it is very well-worn territory, and adding anything new to the conversation is a challenge unto itself.
Did you ever see Jodorowsky's Dune?
Yeah,
the documentary.
well, that was one of the things that got me going back to try doing it. Was just again seeing something taken that far.
Yeah.
Inspired me to just say, okay, well, all right, if you're going to take the lid off like that, then let's really do this. It's it was Jodorowsky's Dune. I love mostly because they spend the first little while talking about how incredible this movie could have been, and you're like, this is like the perfect Valhalla of movies. Why did this? It is a hate crime that this was never created. How dare they? Like, they crushed this perfect vision, and then they put on the producer and be like, it would have cost billions of dollars. It was absolutely impossible to film. You're like, oh, okay, sure, fair enough.
So now, like, you could absolutely see something of that scale being done as a miniseries on like HBO.
Oh yeah, totally. And well, and part of what clicked for me, and one of the reasons I wanted to do my own, was because it made me think of something that I knew I was never going to see if I didn't do it myself. And that was Jodorowsky's Dune, but done with the budget that, say, Tarsem Singh could get.
Yeah.
So not crazy, but still a major release.
Yeah,
and so
blockbuster.
Yeah, so, and I've always liked the aesthetic that Tarsem Singh uses in his movies, and I wanted to try to combine those things.
How do you feel about Denis Villeneuve and his pass at Dune? Do you feel confident?
It's been a long time since I've been this excited.
Yeah.
About a movie.
Because he just killed it with the Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, I look at that as being a massive, like a 2.5 hour long, or however long it is, a massive trailer for Dune. I don't think I've actually been, I don't think I've said this out loud, but I don't think I've been this excited for a movie since like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Because he's proven himself. It sounds like they're going to make at least 2, like it's going to be a 2-parter. And
Probably a good idea.
And just for the state that movies are in and what we get to see Dune doing, and his, just for how well Blade Runner was designed, and I'm excited. And I've said this before. I'm also dreading it a little bit because it's going to do. I have a feeling it's going to do to Dune what the Peter Jackson films did to Lord of the Rings, and that is to be so decisive in their design.
Yeah.
That it basically,
you can't imagine it any way else.
Yes, yeah. Every reading of it from this point forward will be Denis Villeneuve's version.
It's a scary prospect, but it's also, so I think it's something that like anyone who's adapting a non-visual story into a visual medium is sort of hoping to achieve, right?
Oh,
if
yeah.
You can create the definitive imagery for a story, like you've absolutely nailed it.
Absolutely. Well, and why I think now too, you look at say, just any of the teams that are working today, the people who are working in, ILM or these films, like, it's, if anyone can do it, I'm just really hoping that they go far with it. I'm hoping I'm hoping that it looks like 10,000 years in the future.
Well, what inspires confidence is that he obviously just took a lot of time to pay homage to the original Blade Runner with
Yep.
2049.
Yeah.
It's clear that he has done the homework. He knows how to honor what's already been made,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got a huge commitment to
Yeah.
the spirit of the story, which is it's extremely reassuring in that sense.
It is. Yeah, exactly. Junkspur says, it's such a shame it was never made, but yeah, it was a crazy idea. And Villeneuve is going to crush it, says John Studio. Yeah, I absolutely is. You guys, you're just hanging out in the Twitch chat when there's room in the Discord, I think. We've still got a couple spaces if you want to jump in. Actually, we have 6 spaces. Let me see. So you're free to. I understand some people are definitely nervous about it. Oh, wait, let me see here. Here we go. Would be cool if they used my designs for the movie. Yeah, that would. Yeah, I partly also drew those just so that they were out there and done, because they're not even really, they're not totally how I picture them. Like that's the way I drew them. That's not how I read Dune. It was more going through the process. Because I think in many ways what I picture is probably wrong. Like it's not, if you were to just read the text and design out of the text, I think it would be wrong. But I think that's something that happens in books a lot, is your imagination just sort of overrides it and you become attached to something.
I think it's interesting when I'm reading books. It's hard for me to pin down exactly, like, if someone asked me to describe like who I imagine when I'm reading a story, like if I'm talking, like say we're talking about like the King Killer Chronicles,
Yeah.
like, picture, like tell me who you picture when you picture Kvothe, and it's like, well, I can't really like give you, I can't like give you a rundown like I'm describing someone in a police lineup, right? Like I know what this character looks like in my head. It would take me time to translate that into like a 2-dimensional picture of that character.
Yeah. Well, shoot, what's his name? Hang on. Sorry. Okay, just gonna type something in here. Yeah, so I say, like, who do you picture as Kvothe from the King Killer Chronicles, and why is it Eddie Redmayne?
That's actually, yeah. he would kill it. He would, yeah. Damn. Especially the way he looks in like the fantastic creatures.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit. The hard part is gonna be translating that, because he just looks perpetually young is the problem. So if he's like, who are you gonna get for older Kvothe though? That's the real question.
Right. And who can portray enough charisma that you don't mind how much of a shit Kvothe is?
He is.
Because there has been, I like those books. I'm into them. They work. But man alive, I have not come across a more insufferable protagonist.
It's like you can forgive it a little bit just based on what he's been through and what he's accomplished on. But yes, he is.
Yeah.
Such a huge pain. It's it's no wonder that so many people dislike him in the books.
Oh yeah. And this is a book that I like enough that I've actually done fan art for, which is so rare, it's crazy. So I say this out of love. Turned out Patrick Rothfuss was actually speaking at an event that I was also speaking at, and I missed him. I didn't realize he was there, and I didn't say hi.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
What event were you speaking at?
It was PAX Dev in Seattle. There's a...
Oh.
Yeah.
Why was he speaking at PAX Dev?
I think he was talking about storytelling in games. I'm not sure if he was working on a project or like he had been involved in something, or he was helping out with a game or something. I'm not sure what the actual context was. Okay, we've got a question. So when I start to design characters and sketch the shapes, after I am more or less happy with the overall sketch, it is hard to go into specifics. Like, is it hard to figure out what this sketchy triangle is or the sketchy sphere? Is it a bag? Is it a shoulder pad, etc.? And then often hit a wall. Well, then you just need to increase the resolution on your story, I think. So you have your rough sketch. You have, it seems like if you're sketching like that, then you probably have an aesthetic in mind. Might be better to start again from a story perspective and say, who is this character? What are they about? How do I want the audience to respond to them? Try drawing them again in that context so that you're not making arbitrary shapes like just a triangle. And I don't know if it's a bag or a shoulder pad or what, but it's a triangle. You should have figured the character out enough that it is obvious you will need a triangle, and it is obvious that that triangle must be a shoulder pad, and that will help give you clarity. And then if you want to design a different kind of character, turn the dial on the story, change the story elements, change who they are or how you want the audience to react to them. It's a much more effective and kind of focused way of designing the characters. Alternately, if you're just trying to do an exploration and it is purely just aesthetics, look at it, pick one, pick whatever it hits you as, and go in and do another layer of like storytelling drawings. So say, okay, we've got this triangle, and I think it's going to be a bag. So what kind of bag, and what would you put in a triangular bag, and how would you fasten a triangular bag, and what it's probably going to have some points. So how would you soften the points, or would you exaggerate the points, or so the more and more things you can start to do like that, you kind of walk through the creature, or walk through the design and tell the story. Celia Sai says, I met Patrick Rothfuss at PAX South and it changed my life. Oh, nice. He's a pretty funny guy. Swears a lot. So I've heard. Okay, so I've got my skeletons. All right.
I feel like also when you're designing a character where you're just starting with very abstract like shapes, it doesn't hurt to just like take multiple passes at trying different things for what those shapes are.
Yeah, especially if it's at that level, where if you are just trying to, I'm not totally against purely just aesthetic exploration. You're right. Like if you want to try that, it's worth not getting. Don't fall in love with anything at that stage. That's the stage where it's okay not to fall in love with anything. You can really. Try a whole bunch. See what some triangles on there look like. Try some squares. Flip them upside down. Try drawing something with no shapes at all. No, probably don't try doing that.
Unless you want to learn how to draw like clouds or ghosts.
Just smudges.
Yeah. Astral forms.
Which, man, yeah. Even then, that just made me think about the last time Galactus made a cinematic appearance. It just made me a little bit sad. So I'm just applying some muscles to these skeletons. No, just letting people know what I'm doing right now. Just applying some muscle to skeletons. But sorry, you were saying about Galactus.
That was the Silver Surfer, right? Or was it the remake?
Pretty sure it was the Silver Surfer.
So I never saw the reboot of Fantastic Four because after it came out, I just heard that it was garbage.
It was pretty studioed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did finally see that one. And boy, oh boy, did they sure maintain the rights to that intellectual property.
Oh boy.
Although now they've reverted to Marvel, haven't they? Have you guys talked about Infinity War yet? I'd love to hear some thoughts about the movie. Oh no, we're sliding into this.
I don't know if they gave up the rights back to Marvel for Fantastic Four yet.
I could see Galactus being a great next thing.
Either that, or do they go back to like Dormammu?
Or that, true. I guess he's kind of locked in the closet for now. Bert says, interesting because this is what confuses and annoys me, and all the schools or artists only teach make cool shapes that look cool, like triangles are dynamic and spheres are soft. This is what I really like about your designs and the designs of Tom. You guys go really deep into this story. So awesome. Well, thanks. I think, honestly, it's like the story is the only thing that is going to survive, really, that nobody cares about. Honestly, okay, for real, nobody cares about drawings of rogues and knights and stuff like that, really, unless they are telling a story. Like, the drawings alone are meaningless. But if they can actually convey a story, then they last forever. Look at go to the Vatican and look at the sculptures and paintings there and stuff like that, and they are telling stories. They are conveying emotion. They are like lasting. There are so many beautiful pieces of commercial art that were just garbage because they are just a drawing of a thing and they don't tell a story. They're just a pretty picture. Yeah, it's well, and it's kind of like you look at. I'll take Soviet era propaganda, for example, and you can get like these, in some cases, very beautiful paintings that were done for really evil kind of reasons, or to like just to propagate the Soviet Union. But as time fades, as time passes, the intended propaganda meaning passes away, and they become these beautiful images in their own right. But the ones that really survive, even in that case, are ones where a story is being told even through the visuals.
I think the only reason you would value like just a random drawing of like a character devoid of story would just be for the technique. That's frequent. Like if I'm saving a post on Instagram of somebody's knight or rogue, it's because I like how they've drawn a certain thing, or like the aesthetic that they've achieved with it.
Totally, which is absolutely relevant to people like us. But is definitely not lasting, I don't think.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just wonder how I'd react if they were to announce a film adaptation of The Parable. I'm not actually too familiar with that. Yeah, we haven't talked about Infinity War. I haven't.
I've seen it.
I have too.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, welcome.
Hi.
Hey, more people are jumping in. All right.
I think like I liked Infinity War for the most part. I only had really two major complaints, and they're not like super spoilery either.
Is this going to be
haven't seen it?
Anyone who wants will have to just end the stream, just jump out.
Yeah.
Okay. So what were your complaints?
Number one, I don't think Thanos' reason for what he was doing was personal enough. Like, it's fine to say like the reason I want to do what I'm doing is because it
X
caused my planet's destruction. You know, like that's like a fine reason, but it's also like it's so impersonal. It's so like scientific and like such a macro scale problem where it's
sure.
I need to clear out my fridge or I need to clear out half my fridge because it's too full for other stuff right now.
Yeah.
It's like if he had just given something like I had a wife or I had a family that died because there was water shortages because there were too many people on the planet. That's like even that
Right.
is
You
enough of a
didn't see him
reason.
suffering. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, especially when the movie is like it's really Thanos' movie.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like. I mean, he's what allows all these different characters that have
Yeah.
been set up by the films to connect with each other. Especially like when you look at Guardians of the Galaxy, somehow finding their way to the other characters in the Marvel universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was that was my first complaint, and then my second complaint was that for a movie about reunions and also like first time meetups, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't give a lot of weight, and it's such a crazy complaint because it's almost a 3 hour movie. But I feel like they didn't give enough time or like enough weight to some of those encounters or some of those reunions
Right.
that I would have liked to have seen.
Right. Yeah, that sounds fair. I totally know what you're saying. I just realized John says that Parable was the Mobius Stanley Silver Surfer short, which is one of the greatest comics that has ever been printed. And I totally forgot that that's what it was called. And you're right. If that was what they were making, I would be 100% down and totally in, because it was like that was when I finally got the Silver Surfer and why the Silver Surfer is actually good. Probably what kicked off my love of Mobius. Imagination's Playground says, I'm struggling with coloring in Photoshop. I paint with acrylics, so I know how to mix colors traditionally, but there's a disconnect when I color digitally. Do I have any tips or exercises I could do to break past this? Well, if you know how to mix paint, I think Photoshop might actually be almost easier, because really what you're trying to do is just pick the colors that you want, but you have to go through the thought process anyway to pick your colors. So pick the colors in your mind. Like, unless I guess you're spending most of your time just hunting for colors on the palette, then I don't know if I can help you. But usually if you're mixing colors already, you know roughly where you're going. So this, instead of having to take all the time to smush pigment together, you can just go to that place directly. I don't know. I guess maybe to me that seems like it might be easier.
Yeah, I think maybe just like start with a palette in mind before you start doing anything.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
pull the swatches that you know you're gonna want to use in the piece, and then go from there. Like
Yeah,
if you need to make adjustments on the fly with saturation or like hue or tone, you know, you can make them really easily.
I think that makes sense. Starting with a palette so that you're just picking from that might be a good way to go. The nice thing about Photoshop is that it's like you can kind of work with it like it's watercolors or like it's oils, or like, you know, you can kind of pick your approach. But yeah, I was gonna say I finished Infinity War thinking I didn't know what to think, and I finally figured out how to articulate it. It's that it was very, very impressive, but it wasn't a movie. I think that would be the best way to put it. Is that it, and not and this isn't working against it necessarily. It was just, it's so a thing unto itself, like Marvel expanded universe crossover event, massive thing. Like it's a lot of things, but I don't think it's a movie. I think it's for what it was, which is a first of its kind epic Marvel climactic first part of a finale thing. It was great. But like any of the receptors that I've built up to be able to even taste that kind of a thing, it didn't know what to do with it.
What components do you think were missing from it that you would like distinguish it as a movie as opposed to whatever you would call it, I guess?
I think the big thing would be, and you know, you're right, they did make Thanos into a character, and he definitely was the protagonist of the movie, for lack of a better term. But it kind of lacked it lacked that one story to follow, and so you were really left with Thanos as your protagonist, which was neat, and it made sense, and I think the movie worked, but it was just so a thing of its own that it was hard for me to react at first.
I think the only reason it does work at all is because of how much time they put into wanting to make it work. I mean, you can't you like Justice League or the Dawn of Justice or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
any of those movies show that you can't just have this movie without putting in like the decade of work to set up these characters.
Exactly.
You can't have
Yeah.
like you can't just introduce 6 new characters in a movie and expect the audience to be like on board with all of them right away. Like, oh yeah, I'm connecting with this character. I'm totally invested in what happens to them. Like, no, you wind up having 6 half formed characters that no one like even remembers their names. But I definitely agree with that. That it for all that it did have, it lacked the single thread that you could follow through the movie in a substantial enough way.
Yeah, like and you know it's kind of a victim of its own success in that case, in that sense, where you know I do want to find out about Tony and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like I want to know. I do want to know this stuff, but I want to know it so much, and I want to know what each one of them is doing, and to get a chance to actually hang out with them. And you never really get a chance to. Everybody gets their moment, but you're not really spending time with them.
It's not. It's never satisfying. It's never a satisfying enough moment they give you.
Yeah, yeah. It's all effective and still full of character. Yeah, like it's the hardest. It's the hardest thing to complain about because it sounds ridiculous when saying it, but yeah, it's just.
I mean, the fact that it wasn't just crushed by its own weight is like a feat in itself.
Oh yeah, tip of it, like absolutely, pinnacle. I have so much admiration for the fact that they pulled that off. It should not have been possible. Those lunatics, like, and then let's see. Albert says still better than the Last Jedi though. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
hold me back.
Yikes.
Brent,
I have literally had so many conversations about The Last Jedi with so many people, and they're all just like the same conversation.
Brent says not enough Cap. I agree. Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, especially when you realize that the last time you have seen Captain was in
Civil War,
which was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes.
And he doesn't get like any time at all. He barely gets any lines of dialogue,
Yeah.
which I get they're setting him up for like the next movie, which is he's probably gonna have a lot more time, but it's like you just feel shortchanged with so many of these characters reappearing for the first time in so many years.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, The Last Jedi. I gotta.
The thing I keep saying about The Last Jedi, the one thing that I keep coming back to is that it's a movie that had a lot of like, it had some great moments, but it was a terrible movie. It was just an awful movie.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Subverting expectations. The movie.
But like not even productively. It's just for the sake of expectation.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it was for its own sake, and one of those cases where it kind of shows that the power of storytelling, that when you diverge from for lack of a better term I'll call the story, it just doesn't sit on the tongue the right way. I don't know.
Well, so going back to what we were talking about a while ago, it feels like with the idea of outlining your whole story so that everything makes sense. Like I found out after seeing the movie that there was no plan for this trilogy. At no point in production or development of after Disney was like, we want 3 new Star Wars movies, did anyone sit down and say, okay, what are they going to be about? They always said, okay, we're just going to hire J.J. Abrams, and he's going to write and direct the first movie. All right, now
Mm-hmm.
we're going to hire Ryan Johnson. He's going to write and direct the second movie, and they are not going to get together and talk about it at all. And
Yeah.
it's just so apparent when you watch it because everything that J.J. Abrams set up is just completely ignored or like deliberately thrown away.
Well, it's interesting too. There's an element of that. I can't fault them for making that decision in a funny way, because technically that would recreate a similar scenario that the first movies went through. Because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, let's make an adventure movie that's really, it turns out it's really popular. Let's make a follow up, and then they create a follow up. So the original trilogy wasn't planned in that sense.
No, but I think what
And
it had going for it was that it had a single creative
yes,
director.
yes, definitely. Um, so yeah, I get the idea of why that would have come to them, but for sure, it has proven itself not to have been the call.
Prudent.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's really hot. It's like Fortnite.
Let's see here. Get this. Oh, okay. Oh, what? Oh my goodness. I was drawing on the wrong skeleton. I'm just.
You hate to see that happen.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, not a lot's been lost. That's okay. I'm just gonna create a sketch layer already.
Matt, did you do any work on Dragon Age in the last court?
The Dragon Age: The Last Cut.
Court. It was like a narrative thing that was like it was licensed to Fail Better Games.
What was
Okay.
it? What format did it take?
It was like like a story where you have like an interface. Wait, one sec.
Because I didn't, but because I only work on the main games.
Right.
But the work that we do, we will give it to other teams to do ancillary products and like mobile games or browser games, that kind of thing. So stuff that I have done has probably made it in there.
Cool.
Yeah. Just because I've done a ton of Dragon Age designs at this point. Let's see. Rilo romance and Force Rose. Finn romance hurt. Oh, yeah, we could just keep drilling in. The most enjoyable thing about Last Jedi is the critics. I basically watched it just to watch all the YouTube content making fun of it. It has been. Honestly, as the watching it go, I now I get more excited for these movies because of the Red Letter Media review that's coming
Oh my God.
after it. That's the part I look forward to now. Comparing Marvel movies to DC, I think it's great that Marvel has rhythm on humor, action, and drama, where DC takes itself maybe too serious. I don't know if that's inherited from the Dark Knight legacy, probably, which worked great when there wasn't elements of superpowers and such. Although there's, someone made a good point recently that like the Dark Knight isn't actually as grim as people seem to remember. The new Star Wars movies are a gigantic waste of opportunities. There's a huge extended universe with so many cool stories and characters. The best they can come up with is a big round weapon of mass destruction, a droid in the desert, and some secret plans. Well, and Red Letter Media, like Rich Evans says, Star Wars, they unfortunately are finding out, is a very limited franchise. It does the hero's journey and the Force and that very, very, very well. But not a lot
Especially, well, maybe at least in like the film media. But I mean, when I went back and played KOTOR 2 recently,
Mm-hmm.
and for how incomplete that game was, which still breaks my heart, it did a really great job of exploring more mature, or at least more like I guess realistic themes within the Star Wars universe that were set up by the very classic like, hero's journey in the first KOTOR, which still wasn't like a classic hero's journey. It actually had a really fantastic twist to it. But yeah, the films, like, they're just trying to do too much with a formula that just works.
I got a question. Did you guys ever
Sure.
watch the Clone Wars?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Not all of it, but bits and pieces.
Yeah, I've always thought that the storytelling in those is so much, I don't know, just more in depth than some of the actual films itself.
Well, it's funny how
Well, yeah,
so much of
sorry, go
that
ahead.
expanded universe stuff really does, it's told by people who love it deeply, and you get stuff out of it that is, because for me, the Jedi Knight series is my jam. That's like Kyle
Yeah.
Katarn and that whole series and all the characters that came out of that. And it's amazing how just that deep love of it that so many people had actually translated really well.
I remember seeing the promotional images for Rogue One and thinking, like, that's Kyle Katarn. They're just gonna do a Kyle Katarn movie. I was like so excited for that, and I still liked Rogue One in spite of everything. But man, how cool would that have? But yeah, I think Clone Wars. I haven't seen pretty much any of the Clone Wars series. Unfortunately, I saw the old miniseries
Like
on
the
Cartoon
Gendy
Network way back
Tartakovsky
when.
one.
Yeah, which was amazing. But
Yeah.
the luxury that the TV series has is that it's a TV series. It has just way more time to dedicate to like nuances of storytelling of the universe, whereas the movies have to sort of present you with.
They have to do it in one.
Yeah, they do. They have to do something straightforward because they only have 2.5 hours to do it.
I mean, now they kind of can just keep making Star Wars movies, though. It's, like,
Yeah.
it's not like they're gonna stop. They could.
Oh,
they
no,
have all
yeah.
the opportunity to explore, different kind of things.
I think we just need to pay more
It's
attention
true.
to like what people are actually interested in seeing now, because like I have absolutely zero interest in seeing the Solo movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I just keep referring to it as the Star Wars movie that nobody wanted to see. Because no one that I talk to wants to see that movie. Like they just don't care.
I'm kind of finding the same thing. Oh, Mighty Havoc says hi. Hey. Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's just no. I think you put it best. Yeah, it's the one that nobody really asked for. I personally, I'm at a point where I will have to be dragged back to Star Wars. That multiple people that I trust are going to have to say no, trust me. The last two have actually been pretty good. For me to come back. I mean, thinking about getting if they were to go to the point where see, because what I was hoping for to already be at was to be pretty conservative about with it to start, and then to have by the time you got to something like a Rogue One or like your first side things, you were getting into Guardians of the Galaxy territory where it's like we're going to do something you've never seen. We've earned your trust. We know you're with us. Now we're gonna go nuts, and you're not gonna want to do it at first, but trust us, when we get there, you're gonna love it.
I think, because I agree with that. I think The Force Awakens gave them some capital in that sense, because even though it was pretty much just like a carbon copy of A New Hope, they coming off of like the prequel trilogy, which came out almost 20 years ago, it's still like a sore spot for a lot of like dedicated Star Wars fans. So like the fact that they were like willing to just go back to the roots of what made the original trilogy great was like, it was reassuring, if not totally unique and totally like original. It was still like, it showed that they were serious about recapturing the essence of Star Wars. So I was like happy to go into Rogue One.
Yeah, it was that proof to say, hey, look, we can actually do Star Wars. You got it. We're all on the same page here. You trust us? Okay, cool. Now watch what we can do.
And then they completely blew it.
Yeah. The biggest thing that Salaya says biggest thing that disappointed me was the lack of variety with aliens and no legacy ones. Didn't see a single Twi'lek, Togruta, Rhodian, etc. And the new aliens are all beige, ugly, and have beady eyes with squished faces. Friend Owl Design says, I found The Last Jedi to be too jammed with awful forced humor and these awful, lovable, endearing characters. I'm not a grimdark stan, but like nothing can be funny if nothing is serious.
I really agree with that.
Yeah.
Because a friend of mine put it really well. She said that for how, like, when you watch the old Star Wars movies, even the prequel movies, the dialogue is like, it's kind of like weird, semi-formal way of talking.
Mm-hmm.
And it is completely devoid of like these Western colloquialisms that we have right now.
Yeah.
And even then, when they were first made, it was like this. It was the same language we were all speaking, but just without like idioms, without like these colloquialisms of speech, and it was kind of like this. It was just kind of awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And the prequel movies were able to capture that too, but then the Last Jedi comes out, and they like it's just they've used Marvel writers for a Star Wars movie. So you have like
Right.
the opening scene is literally like a your mom joke,
Yeah.
and it's like, why? What am I watching right now?
Yeah.
I think the problem with the Last Jedi, well, I know not generally, but like at least in the regards to the aliens, was that there was too much variety because they tried to make just like only like new ones, like they really like none of the pre-existing ones were really featured at all, like especially in that canteen area.
Right. Like they're kind of going,
Like-
thinking it read as a little bit toyetic, to coin the old term,
Oh yeah,
or to use the
there
old
was
term.
one alien. It was literally like a turkey with a top hat and
Mhm.
a monocle. It was a bit. It seemed a bit bootleg.
Yeah, it was interesting doing seeing these new movies in the context of having done the ILM challenge, and hearing some of their thought process and what they wanted to see people think about and how they wanted people to think about. Like, go look at the old films and try to really take apart what made those work, and or like what that aesthetic is. Try to wrap your head around it. And it was kind of interesting to go and really take a hard look at it, because it's something you realize that it's so easy to take for granted because we have such cultural saturation with it. But one of the things that I noticed when I examined it was that it's and I was saying this on another stream the other night, that because so much of the models and the costumes were like just things we found. We have a Wolfman mask, put this on, or the models are, we've got all this extra stuff, spray painted gray, and it's a ship. The aesthetic of the original Star Wars seemed to be how I would put it, was just like, relax, it's science fiction. And and so sometimes you see that in the new movies, which I kind of appreciate, where it's like it's just some weird guy wearing a coat. And that's actually surprisingly Star Wars. But then it's mixed beside the stuff that's really, really designed, where it's like you can tell they're, people are kind of more in the mindset of, we're designing something for Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just think about the alien like following Han back to the Millennium Falcon with like the gas mask on and the overcoat, and it's like they just dug into some like post-apocalyptic war movie
Mm-hmm.
props and threw that together. But it worked. It was like this jerry-rigged sci-fi, this like patchwork universe, but it all made sense together somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And then they threw it away.
Yeah. Albert says it right. Oh no, I shouldn't have opened this can of worms. I know. Okay, let's all agree. Deep breath. We'll eject. Here's something that this is something we do at work, that I like to try to do at work, is because these are impossible conversations to avoid at work, because it's a building full of professional nerds. But what I like to do is, after we've done it for a little while and you realize that you've kind of gotten carried away, is think, okay, how do we apply these things that we all obviously know how to do it right, and how it shouldn't be done. How do we apply these concepts to what we are working on right now? So maybe not this drawing, but maybe just like overall concept art in general, or visuals. Like, okay, maybe they're missing the mark right now. What would be? How do we get it right? And go. I think in general, the aspect of Star Wars was lost after transferring to Disney. Yeah, it's rough. It's okay. Okay, we got to shift. Okay, we're out of Star Wars. Okay.
Well, I think, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, just having, if not like one person in charge of everything, at least having like communication, communicating the ideas that you're trying to convey across a project. Like if you know you aren't going to have the same people working on the same project all the way throughout, then you need to make sure that every idea that you want to include is communicated clearly and effectively, so that whoever's picking up where you're leaving off isn't in the woods, right? They need to have the threads in their hand when you walk away, so that what's created and what's done isn't a bastardization of what you've set up. And I think that notion applies in any creative field, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Because sometimes just circumstances force you to have to walk away from a project.
It's true. Well, and to be able to say, to be able to say to yourself or to your team, this is what we are doing, is a huge because I've been on projects where you could tell no one knew what they were really trying to do, and I've been on projects where it's like, this is what we're doing, and the difference is 100% night and day. It's a completely different experience. It's a completely better experience when vision is fully understood. And so if you can articulate it to yourself, to your team, then that translates to the audience as well. Like that people get it.
Yeah, an audience will know when everyone isn't on board. If they will know when the vision wasn't realized in the drawing room.
And I firmly believe too, I've come to believe this because, again, I feel like I've seen this up close, that any vision, any idea is better than the perfect idea that never actually gets figured out. That you could literally pick a bunch of random words out of a hat, blow up a stack of encyclopedias, and just pick up the shreds, glue them together, and congratulations, that's your new IP. And if your team is committed and they're focused and they're working and they're really trying to tell a good story, you'll do it. It'll work. And so, yeah, just consistency and clear vision and story.
I think also understanding the tone of what you're creating is super important, and how it relates to other works that you've created in the same IP, or like in the same genre. Because someone, I forget who made the comment earlier about the DC movies being too serious, not having the right, it's not that they were too serious, is that the levity they injected didn't fit the movie. It wasn't true to the characters. It wasn't true to the circumstances they were facing. Because I recently watched whatever the most recent Justice League movie was. And there's a scene where Batman, when Superman first comes back to life, Batman is he's nervous and kind of awkward about him coming back to life. He's like, well, I killed you, It's well, first of all, if you understand anything about that character, he's never awkward or uncomfortable. Right? That's the first thing about, that's probably one of the key components of that character is that he's not an awkward person, and he's not something that's like wishy-washy. He does what he does, and he's unapologetic about it.
Yeah, yeah. He's the fictionalized version of what's his name, the U.S. General General Mattis, who said like
Yeah.
have a plan, have a plan to kill everyone.
Yeah.
That's Batman. He just
Yeah. Like if in that like if I think about like the Bruce or the oh god, who did the animated series way back when? Was
Bruce
that
Timm.
Bruce Timm? Yeah, okay. I was like Bruce Wayne. No, it wasn't Bruce. It was Bruce Timm. Yeah. When I think about the Batman animated series, or like even the Justice League series, I just imagine like Kevin Conroy's voice being like, "We have more important things to worry about right now than who killed who."
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like that is like the level of like intent that
Yes.
that character should be operating on. And if you're doing your homework from like a design standpoint or from a writing standpoint, you know that's the character. You
Mhm.
know that's the emotion or the tone you need to convey. And when you are just trying to copy another IP's success, like you see like these are the variables that work for Marvel, they should therefore work for DC.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't, because the characters are just so dramatically different. And that's where they miss the mark. It's not that humor won't work in those movies, it's that it doesn't work the way they were trying to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's another principle that translates to design, to storytelling, to a project. You have to understand the tone of the story that you're creating, so that everything that you write or create for it is true to that tonality and to the themes that you're emphasizing.
Yeah. Well, my head, I always go to. So now how do you draw that? Because thinking, even it's interesting to see the difference between what was released in the trailers versus what was actually released on film.
Yeah.
Or in the final cut. And there was a lot of scenes that were actually really lightened up, and some scenes that were filmed in super grim scenarios that were then they color corrected to daylight to be very bright. Like,
Yeah,
so there was
that's right.
there was an actual visual concerted effort to shift tone. So I think there were some people that knew that. And it's interesting to think about how you would go about if they could have figured out that story first, figured out that tone first, and then designed everything after that. Would they have designed Batman differently? Would they have designed Superman differently? All that kind of thing.
I think ultimately you have to. I think because everything has to serve the story. Every design choice you make has to serve the story that you're telling.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. Because otherwise, you're just wasting your time with frivolous designs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can become distracting if they don't work in the sense of the story. And I think if you take time to like really dissect what your design choices are going to mean within the context of the story, you have to first know what your story is going to be about, or you have to first know like the tone of that story. Because like if you're writing a post-apocalyptic graphic novel, for example, you're not going to have these really saturated color palettes until maybe the end, as like a way of showing the resurgence of hope, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for like the first 2/3 or 3/4 of it, it's going to be pretty, neutral and dark and gritty. It's not going to be happy, fun, bright like Thor Ragnarok colors.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be like
The Road.
original Iron Man, or like the Dark World or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like The Road, yeah. And you have to know that that's what you're trying to set up going in. Otherwise, you're going to have these conflicting languages, and you're just gonna confuse the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you had a movie like The Road and everything was just blown out, hyper saturated, people would be like, "What am I watching right now?"
The Road with the color grading of Oz, Great and Powerful.
Good God.
Um,
I want to see it now, just at morbid curiosity. But it would be atrocious.
yes. Well, and that's something that I know. Me and the main artist that I've been working with lately on my current project, we've been trying to really get more self-disciplined, and say, with everything, why is that there? So if we're designing a character, and we both catch each other in it all the time, and we say, okay, so tell me about those boots. Why are they like that? It's like, because I wanted to draw them like this.
Because they're cool.
They're cool. I like this shape. It's like, okay, either come up with a good reason or change them. So that absolutely everything is in support of story and character and the setting overall. Like when I say story, especially in games, here's just a little context. I'll say like story with a capital S. Basically, you're thinking about, there's the written story, the words that people speak and the events that take place, but I definitely count setting as a major element in that. So just sort of the world around you and all of that. So it's a pretty expansive word when I use it.
Well, games especially becomes more involved because, so story. I feel, especially with games, I feel like story inevitably ends up taking a backseat to the gameplay, and especially with the way games are trending now, where they're trending towards open world, they're trending towards player freedom, not making you experience the narrative that they've crafted like immediately or like in a linear fashion. You're spending so much more time investigating the world that it has to be consistent with the story. Otherwise, it's going to be bizarre and foreign. You're going to wonder what is this place that I'm in that has absolutely nothing to do with the overall narrative.
Yeah. The setting has to support the story. It has to be. It's because it's going to be spending more time telling it to the viewer than anything else.
Like have you played the recent God of War game?
I haven't, but I have watched a lot of it.
Yeah.
I don't have the latest PlayStation.
I won't spoil anything. I will say that is a game that really does nail the idea of making the setting consistent with the story.
Right.
It may or may not have been easier for them just because they're relying so heavily on like Norse mythology.
Right.
But that game would not have worked if it were set in like a jungle or an urban city locale.
Mm-hmm.
It obviously has to it has to exist in this specific place at this specific time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's confusing and it's discordant.
Right. God of Boy.
Matt, do you ever make a design and then just like arbitrarily, but then like try and go back to justify it?
Yes.
Like, okay, this is what, because I was I did a sketch for a character that would be in the environment that I was working on last week, and I gave him a specific hat, like it was like a diamond-shaped hat, and I didn't know why I did it, but I was like, oh, okay, well maybe this kind of looks like a gold gondola, and like if you think of like those like gondola ferries, like there's the people with those sticks. Like maybe they're like a guide. So like in a throne room context, maybe that would be like they're an advisor. Okay, they're an advisor now. Like,
yeah.
I didn't actually intend to design an advisor, but now
sure. No, I think honestly, to me, there's always going to be a little bit of that. I think, and a certain amount of, I think instinct does still play a role. That there are still some, that's been part of the challenge of working on this art codex that I've been working on, is trying to find a way of codifying what started as instinct still based on good information, but is just still it's still very much based off of real ideas, but you're just trying to actually write down, like, why are those all triangles? We just keep drawing them like that, but there's actually a pretty good reason. So I think there's some give and take. I think it can be both. More and more, I'm personally trying to be as intentional as I can possibly get away with, as much as time will allow. But I think that's definitely valid. What if your instinct told you to design those boots this way, but your mind haven't figured out why? Yeah, well, and part of it, maybe you'll figure it out when you've drawn it. And if you honestly can't find a good answer for it, it's probably, it's you haven't found the right solution yet.
I think also, the more you work on like a singular, like a specific project or a specific genre, you start just tending towards those instincts that fit the setting you've created, just unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you've been working with the same like aesthetic for so long, or you've used the same shapes to design certain things. It ends up just falling into place that way over time. And you spend less time having to justify why, because it fits.
For sure. Without going into any specifics, I just actually recently did that, where we picked a while ago we had figured out what we wanted the basic shape language of this group to be, and only recently really drilled down on specifically why it's relevant. It was a good shape language for them. We just knew instinctively that'll work. We could work with that. And now we can say, okay, it is because of this multitude of reasons. Here's all the in-world. And I think that's an okay direction to work. Well, the really clear example that I have that I can speak to is in Dragon Age, if you're familiar with it, there's a group called the Kunari, and they're these big horned guys that are all about physicality. They're very anti-magic, and they're effectively communists. Like they don't believe in personal identity, and nobody owns anything. We're all one piece of a whole.
They're collective.
Yeah, and so we figured out this. When designing them for Inquisition, I wanted to give them a armor language that was a little bit different. So, saying that they're pretty basic in the access to minerals that they have. So their metalwork is very big but not very fine, and so they have these big plates of armor. But I wanted to create a language for attaching it so that they all had this universal harness. So we got these like red ropes and just wrapped them all over their torsos and arms. So it's like, okay, cool. That's the base on which they lash all of this stuff. So practical beginning, but then over time now we've actually worked it in that the red rope also signifies what they call the Qun. It's like the one group that they all belong to. It's like their religion, basically. And so each one of them is a small part of this one continuous cord that is the Qun. And eventually it's going to tie up the whole world and, be the all-encompassing belief system. So it's one of those cases where it started as an aesthetic to solve a practical problem that we then turned into a story element. So I'm a firm believer in that you can do these things out of order a little bit.
As long as in the end it all works together.
Yeah, and to do that kind of thing, you also need a team that is happy to cooperate and work together on that. You need writers and designers who are willing to roll with it, and then you need to be willing to roll with them when they come up with something and like, yeah, okay, we can draw that. That's insane, but it'll actually be kind of cool. let's see. So with coming up with God of Boy being a success in an established and beloved series, how do you approach coming into a project to continue a series like that you haven't worked on before? What are steps you take to try and improve and not have a, well, The Last Jedi or similar situation? That's a good question. And I would say that my primary experience with that would be coming on to Dragon Age 2. So I was barely involved in Dragon Age Origins, the first one in the series, but I came on to Dragon Age 2, and there was a new art director, and I became the lead concept artist on that project. So that was a case where we looked at Dragon Age Origins, and we really tried to examine what it was really about, like really, really about. And our art director, Matt Goldman's read on Dragon Age was that it was really like a Northern Renaissance style memento mori, like a tale of death and the fallibility of humans and that kind of thing. And so we used the Northern Renaissance as a starting point to think about all of our design work after that. We also wanted to apply and hone in on graphic design principles. So for Dragon Age 2, way back in the day, there was some controversy. Controversy, it was barely controversy, but some people got upset that that we redesigned the Darkspawn, which are effectively just the orcs from that series. And I was the one who pushed for that and fought for that and got into meetings to argue for it. So I'm willing to take the blame for that. But it was largely based on story and functionality, because in the design of them in Origins was very much just like a cool design that they picked and they went with it. But with Dragon Age 2, we had the opportunity to change things up in the name of story. And so, or at least that was something I was very passionate about. So we redesigned them to from a practical standpoint, almost everything in Origins bled together. If you look up screenshots of Dragon Age Origins today, it's mostly just like fields of gray and brown that you have to kind of squint at to see that there's actually characters in it. And that was for a number of technical reasons that were unfortunate. But the new Darkspawn, what we wanted to do was create a palette for them that was very high contrast, that would make sure that they were visible in any lighting scenario and in any environment palette, because they could appear anywhere. So it was creating a design palette for them that was very very high contrast, lots of darks and lights. They also were a very like a brutish, slavering, impossible to reason with horde. And their original design in Origins, the armor on them was more sophisticated than most of the human armor available. Like it just was more intricate, had more details and more fasteners and all that sort of stuff. It was incredibly sophisticated and didn't really support what they were and kind of what they were in the story. So we created a design language for it where it was still armor, but it just looked like it was unbelievably primitive. Like they would more just like tear the steel or like bend it over rocks or whatever else like that to get the bare minimum amount of protection necessary. So
you guys also, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so I was just going to say, like, so a whole bunch of these choices were made just for trying to get story and design just that much sharper and that much more in focused. So sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, you guys also redesigned the Kunari in that game, right? Or was that for 3?
That was technically for 2. Yeah. Well, and that was another another one of those cases where you're working with, there's what you would love to design in the ideal, but then there's also the practical realities of what time and technology will allow.
Sure.
So
I was not like opposed to the redesign of the Kunari.
Kind of you to say.
I think a lot of people were pretty upset about it, but I think just looking at the Kunari from Origins, like they're just so similar to humans. They're just bigger humans, and it works, but it doesn't really set it apart from. It's just not
Well,
particularly
and
unique.
that was another thing is setting it apart. It's, you know, you're trying to build up a new franchise, a new intellectual property. You want it to be recognizable. You want people to be able to tell that that is Dragon Age and not Lord of the Rings or whatever's going to come out.
Right.
And so, you know, like I say, the Kunari were one of those cases where, you know, in Origins, I think the intent was to have horns of some kind, but because Sten could be a follower, and you needed to be able to equip all the followers with armor, he'd have these giant horns sticking out of every single helmet, which cool, like that's kind of neat, but some people didn't like that, and so so they decided that he's special, he doesn't have horns, and that means that he's an awesome Kunari somehow. Okay, fine, sure. But then with DA2, because the choice was made to just make the story about this one character, this like hawk, either male or female, it was going to be human. That was going to be what you were playing as. We didn't have to account for that anymore, which meant that any of the Kunari that were going to appear, we could just design them however we had originally intended, or however we wanted to. So, so it's one of those cases where, you know, suddenly now there's lore in Dragon Age that says like there are hornless Kunari, and they're kind of specially allotted within the Qun to specific tasks and all that. So okay, cool, we can still rely on that. Didn't really hurt anything, but now we get some Kunari with massive horns and some with stunted little horns, and yeah, I think it's one of those cases where game development is a very messy process.
Yeah. Well, it's a tightrope too, because you have people who just like viscerally will not accept like these changes. I don't think it was like that like a huge over response with Dragon Age, but there are it's happened where like they're in all kinds of media where like there's a redesign or there's like a reboot or of something, and like the reaction is just insane to that, because people just don't like the new thing, whereas like even if it's like objectively probably better.
Yeah. Oh, I just started. Albert's asking what the name of the female hero I'm drawing is, and yes, that is unannounced. I don't think I ever will tell anybody what the names are. But yeah, and that's the funny thing is, it's like it can be. I would say that it can be poorly broadcast to people, but at the same time, even the best cases where I've seen it broadcast very well, it's true. People tend still to not be down with it. A case that comes to mind is Diablo, the latest Diablo game that came out. When the work for that was shown, it was met with like total outcry. Diablo fans were outraged, and the art director for it ended up doing this big, huge write-up about why these decisions were made. And it was very similar. It was, you know, we're going for readability, and there's all these different areas. We need to have, you know, characters be recognizable and effects be recognizable, all these things. Nope. You are a bastard person and evil, you should be fired. And then people started doing these photoshops where they would Photoshop screenshots of like how Diablo should look. And it was like garbled mess. Couldn't tell what was going on. Just chaos. Like it just proving why this art director had totally made the right call. But yeah, so there's a certain amount that you can explain, and I think at a certain point some people just will have none of it.
People get attached, and I'm guilty of this too. Like people just get attached to like their nostalgia.
Oh yeah.
Of like what something should look like, and it's hard to let that go.
Well, yeah, we're the same group of people that were just talking about Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's hard to let it go, because sometimes it can feel like well, if this has changed, what else has changed?
Yeah.
Right. Like what else are they just disregarding?
Especially if it, and obviously what you don't want is for it to come across as we don't care about this franchise. We're going to do what we want.
Right.
Because I know personally, like let's say in the case of Dragon Age 2, it felt like bomb disposal. Like we were changing things in a way that we're like, we really believe that this will help tell the story better. This will make Dragon Age more Dragon Age. And so it came out of this genuine place of love. And I'm still actually super proud of that project. And just what we were able to accomplish during it. So yeah, I don't know. It's always a learning process. So this was a pretty. I haven't really talked about it much while I'm working on it, but this was a pretty tricky pose that I feel actually fairly happy with where it's come to. So we had. Here was the thumbnail. So now.
Yeah, so they go back to the OG thumbnail.
Yeah, that's. Does the sound disappearing from time to time? Maybe it's because I'm leaning back from the mic. I don't know. I'll lean it forward a little bit more. Okay. So yeah, then the scruffy version to try to articulate that a bit more. Then we get to the skeleton, and now that feels like I could work with that. That feels like a pencil layer to me. I think I could probably start inking that. But I don't think I'll do that tonight. I think that might be where I'll call it. I'll call it there. I say that, but then of course I just keep fiddling with it.
It's hard to let go.
Will I be doing what, sorry?
Oh, would you be doing any critiques from the Discord?
Not tonight, unfortunately.
Okay.
I actually do have to call it a little earlier tonight. All right. It's just you start talking about visual storytelling and Star Wars and Marvel movies, and it's tough not to get sucked all the way in.
Time just flies.
Especially when penciling. So, thank you all very much for jumping in and joining me. Thanks to everyone who jumped in the Discord and the chat. It was awesome having you in here. Yeah, I guess next time, as I'm going along with these, we're reaching this point where I'll do them by there. I might have a couple more done, or maybe one done by the time the next one rolls around. This one will probably be close to finished, so we'll see. I might try to. I don't know if I can actually save it. I get too excited to work on these, so I can never actually save them for the chat for the stream. But I guess that's a pretty good problem to have. Thanks again for joining us, Brent and Gyash. I should just stop trying to read these names. Yeah, thank you. The questions were great. I didn't have to send anybody to the frequently asked questions, so I spent all that time writing it up, and now it's not needed, so that's perfect. Let's see. So yeah, I will see you guys again next Thursday. And so have a good night.
Bye.
All right, the stream is off, but now the Discord is.